What up, fish tank people? FishTankTV.com. Dustin's Fish Tanks bringing it to you with the 5 remaining aquascapers competing this weekend in my first ever live aquascaping contest brought to you by our friends at Dennerland JBJ. Throwing it down in these tanks for those of you who don't know what's going on. This Saturday and Sunday at the Meadowlands, New York, New Jersey, whatever, it's all the same, is Reefapalooza. But in the middle of Reefapalooza, I've got my own little Fresh Fest going on. I want to show all these saltwater people just how beautiful a planted tank can be. I've got 8 competitors competing for a winner-takes-all trophy in my first of going to be mini aquascaping contest live. 8 people competing. 3 of them were introduced yesterday. 5 of them are coming up today. Today we got the Illustrator, we got Brandon G, we got Manny Fresh, we got the Kid, and we got the Dark Horse. I'm going to start with the Illustrator. This is Kevin Kelly. I might choke him before I hug him. Guy was busting my balls a lot about this contest, but now he's in and he's got some amazing scapes. Kevin Kelly is 40 years old. He is out of Brooklyn, New York. You can check out some of his tanks here while you're checking them out. I asked him, what are your thoughts on the state of the planted aquarium hobby in the U.S.? He says, to sum it up in a word, availability. The availability of knowledge, equipment, plans, and confidence. The ease of locating good quality equipment, yet affordable equipment and plants is certainly a huge contributor in the hobby. He goes on to talk about how he was doing a Bing search and found it almost impossible to find specialized equipment and plants in the U.S. You have to be in the know to find these items or pay extra from overseas shipping. This is extremely frustrating to the average hobbyist, and an inability to locate and purchase affordable equipment is holding the United States back. He goes on to say, this leads to a problem too, compromise. The lack of easily found equipment leads to a novice buying subpar plants and equipment, normally from chain stores. They are duped by terrible advice from salespeople. The plants melt, the equipment fails. Desperate, the novice turns to the internet forum looking for help. Unfortunately, some of the elders, he says, in these online communities have lived with compromise so long, they perpetuate the stagnant nature that has become the hobby norm. The novice looks at their tank with melted plants and dying fish, then at their computer screen filled with beautiful lush tanks from around the world. The novice throws up his hands and gives up. I feel this is what happens to many interested within this hobby, and it's great saddening and loss. I totally agree with everything he's saying here. To be successful for now, you have to be stubborn and steadfast. The internet can be extremely intimidating as well. Seeing a beautiful tank and wanting to create it only to fail and not even try seems to be the biggest issue in the hobby today. Like I said, I wanted to choke this dude, but I absolutely love what he's saying, and he's got some beautiful tanks, as you can see. When asked, what would it mean to be recognized as a leader and innovator in design, Kevin brilliantly points out, if I could pass on just a few lessons, it would be possible to have a beautiful tank and layout with patience, perseverance, and planning, not just throwing money at your tank. There's a lot of good ideas out there and advice, so don't be afraid to email anyone with questions ever. As an illustrator, I do not have an exorbitant income. I only spend on the hobby what I can make on plants and equipment sales and the kindness of my local club. I've underlined this because I want you guys to hear it. As a designer, the best advice I ever received was never to be intimidated by elitists. You know who you are. Those that do not share have nothing to teach. This hobby and my profession are about bringing a little bit of beauty into the world. It's a great loss to the entire hobby if we stop teaching and helping others. Well said, Kevin. Kevin's obviously got some beautiful scapes. You can check them all out. I am excited to see this dude throwing down. Next up, Manny D. Manny Fresh. Silverfish member, longtime supporter. Loving having Manny in this contest. Emmanuel Doxy, 34, out of New Jersey. When did you first start working on aquariums? I love this. I was probably about 8 or 9 years old at the time when the store called McCroy's, and in the basement they had a pet shop with the biggest collection of tanks and fish. At the time I didn't know anything about fish or how to keep them, but I definitely pressed my dad to get one. Funny though, we didn't have a lot when I was young. My father and I used to go to the local lake and we would fish for sunnies. They were super aggressive, and I distinctly remember he and I building an indoor pond in the window bay seat of our house we lived in. You could only view the fish from the top, so it was hard to see the fish, but to me it was the best thing ever. And I've been hooked on the hobby ever since. I straight up asked, the last question I asked everybody was, what can people expect from you during the contest? Expect nothing less than Manny Fresh. Giving it to you straight, lay back and observe. I'm excited to meet these people too. It's different actually meeting them in person. Next up, we have Brandon Gregarious, age 32, New York, New York. One of the questions I asked was, when did you first start working on aquariums? I love hearing how people get into the hobby. Like many people, I was introduced to aquariums as a kid. I don't remember exactly what I had growing up, but eventually returned to the hobby my freshman year of college with a 55-gallon Oscar tank. How many people had Oscars in a 55? That ended in disaster when the 55 cracked in the middle of the night in my dorm room. During my sophomore year, one of my roommates had a 100-gallon reef I helped set up and start getting a Pico invert-only saltwater tank. I had a little mantis shrimp for a while and left the hobby for about 10 years. 2 years ago, I started my first planted tank with a Fluval Spec V. Currently, I run 2 high-tech tanks of Fluval Spec 2, Fluval Spec B, both fed off of a single paintball cylinder with a dual manifold. Nice. I also have a filterless 2-gallon heavily planted low tank bowls. I'm into Wabikusa, as you see the small plant, the small little bowls there. Carnivorous plants and succulents and terrariums too. I also have a Biopod 1 on pre-order. I plan on starting a Pico reef in the next year or two. Another question I asked him here, what are your thoughts on the state of the planted aquarium hobby in the U.S. today? He says, quote, we need to convert more reefers to the hobby. Another thing I liked, I said, what do you love most about the hobby? And this is a thing for me as well. There are many aspects of the hobby that have made me hooked. At the most basic level, planted tanks are beautiful to look at, but they are fascinating me because they change. Most other art forms are static, and an aquascape evolves. It's slow. You must have foresight and an understanding of basic aquarium science to be successful. The science of aquatic plants is interesting in its own right. What can people expect from you during the contest, Brandon? I'm just here to have fun, he says. Learn and create something pretty enough that my wife will let me take it home. Good luck, dude. Next up is the youngster, Christian G out of New York. 18 years old, competing in the hardcore contest. Where's your inspiration come from? When Christian was asked, he says, quote, inspiration for me comes from almost everything in life, from talking to people to different events and happenings to my surroundings. I get ideas from anything and everything. To me, it's crazy how easily I can incorporate things into this hobby without even realizing it. My biggest inspiration, this is fun, my biggest inspiration was an old friend of mine. We were really close, so whenever we got on the topic of building tanks, she would go off on how all I do is waste money and it's stupid. Hearing this made me want to prove her wrong, and that's what pushed me to do incredible things I've done. I made it work for me so much harder on working on these aquascapes. He also works for a local shop up there. When I asked the youngster, Christian G, what can people expect from him in this contest, he says, what you can expect from me in this competition, being one of the youngest contestants, I can say it's definitely a great challenge. I'm going into this competition positive and will try my very best. Win or lose, I'm grateful to have gotten this far and being able to experience something this amazing. Being able to compete in such my first New York aquascaping competition with all these amazing people is insane to me. Competing with such artistic people and being at the same level as them is already a win for me. Some of my competitors have been in this for years, so it's definitely a little stressful, but you can expect me to bring out all the shots. He and Kevin are boys. They work together. They have a tight group up there in New York. And last, but certainly not least, and this is the most interesting cat to me, the dark horse, Derek Cara, 39, Lyndhurst, New Jersey. Now, I've only got one photo of his tanks that I'm allowed to show you because he's competing in the global contest. His stuff is sick. You just got to trust me. But this is the one tank. When did you first start working on aquariums? I asked Derek. My dad had fish tanks when I was growing up. They were not planted or anything fancy, but I remember getting my hands wet when I was just a little boy. I really got into this hobby about 7 years ago. One of my neighbors showed me his fish tanks, which triggered my early childhood memories. A few days later, I talked my wife into a 29-gallon complete setup from Petco. The rest is history. By the way, I love seeing people come back to the hobby. I think it's fabulous. When I asked Derek, the dark horse, can't wait to see this dude's tanks, what do you love most about the hobby? He says, I love seeing things grow, viewing stem plants rebounding from massive trims, noticing new stem tips growing with intense color, and viewing driftwood being slowly overtaken by moss. Thanks to this hobby, I've met many interesting people that I would not have a chance to meet otherwise. When I asked him, what can people expect from you during this contest? 2 words, maximum performance, exclamation mark. Folks, can you tell I'm excited about this? You can click the link to check out the 3 competitors I talked about yesterday. If you're in the New York, New Jersey area, come to the Meadowlands, come to Reefapalooza this Saturday, June 25th, 26th. Going to be a fabulous freaking time. Shout out to our friends at Dental and JBJ for throwing down this contest. It's going to be sick. If you like what I'm doing, subscribe. Check out the description box for the whole bios on all these people as much as I can fit in there. Everybody have a fabulous freaking week.